After 15 years in the Army Medical Corps, I thought I'd seen just about everything. War zones, field hospitals, people breaking in ways you couldn't fix. But nothing, absolutely nothing prepared me for what I saw that first morning back home. The coffee was still warm in my hand when I looked out the kitchen window and noticed the garage door was open. My dad never left it open. Not once in all those years. Even after he got sick, he'd shuffle out there every night, double-check the lock, and say, "That car's safer than the White House, kid." I stepped outside, still half in my slippers. Colorado air in June is cool, but that morning it felt sharp. The concrete was cold under my feet, and the smell hit me before I even reached the door: oil, leather, and orange hand cleaner. Every memory of my dad existed in that smell. The Mustang was gone. The space where it sat for 20 years looked wrong, like a missing tooth in a perfect smile. A dark stain on the floor was all that was left, surrounded by his tools, the red toolbox, and a rag he'd left on the workbench before his last hospital trip. I stood there too long, just staring. The logical part of my brain, the soldier part, tried to assess. Had it been stolen, towed, borrowed? Then the emotional part caught up and told me the truth I already knew. Someone took it. I heard tires on gravel before I saw the car. A black SUV pulled up my sister's. Claudia stepped out in sunglasses and heels like she was walking into a board meeting. She always had that perfect confidence, the kind that makes you want to punch something. "Morning," she said, way too casual. "Where's Dad's car?" She shifted her purse, looked over my shoulder into the garage, then back at me. "About that, Claudia. I sold it." Just like that. No pause, no guilt. The words landed like a punch. "You did what?" "I sold it. Evan and I needed the money. We're leaving for Paris next week." "Paris," I repeated, "with Dad's car money." She sighed, like I was the unreasonable one. "He's gone, Mel. You don't even drive it." "It was just sitting there. At least now it'll be appreciated by someone who actually wants it." "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point," she snapped. "You're always clinging to the past: Dad's garage, Dad's medals, Dad's stupid rules. It's time to move on." I didn't yell. Years in the Army teach you how to keep your tone steady when you'd rather explode. "You had no right." Her chin lifted. "I'm the executor. I had every right." That's when I realized she'd planned this for weeks, maybe months, probably while pretending to help me sort Dad's things. "Where's the title?" I asked. "In my name," she said, and smiled the kind of smile that's all teeth and no soul. For a second, I thought about every time Dad tried to get us to work together. How he'd say, "You two are opposite sides of the same coin." He never saw that one side can shine while the other tarnishes. Claudia checked her phone. "Look, I have to go. Evan's waiting. The flight's tomorrow. We'll send you pictures." "Don't bother." She walked back to the SUV, heels clicking on the driveway. The sound was surgical, neat, cold, final. I watched the car disappear down Oak Ridge Drive and stood there until my coffee went cold in my hand. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by Dad's things. His Army patch still pinned to the fridge, his old watch ticking in the bowl where he used to keep his keys. Everything here felt alive except him, and that empty garage felt like the heart cut out of the house. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same thing. Then I called the police. They said if the car was legally sold by an executor, there was nothing they could do. Legal or not, it felt like a theft. I barely slept. I kept hearing Dad's voice from years ago. "If you ever lose something important, kid, don't panic. Look at the facts, not your feelings." So I made a list. Who would she sell it to? When? How much? But every question circled back to one thing. Why? At 6:45 the next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Captain Grant?" A man's voice said. Rough, older, but steady. "Yes? This is Frank Delaney. I run Delaney Classic Motors. Your father was a good friend of mine." My grip tightened on the phone. "I remember him mentioning you. I think you need to come by the shop. I have your father's Mustang. And something he left for you." I blinked. "You what? You have the car?" "I do. But that's not the reason I'm calling." "Half. Then why?" There was a pause on the line, the kind that makes your stomach drop. "Because your father told me to contact you if your sister ever sold it. Said it would mean trouble. Said you'd know what to do." I stared at the dark garage through the kitchen window, that empty space where Dad's legacy used to be. "I'll be there in an hour," I said. "Make it soon," Frank replied. "You'll want to see this for yourself." Zero Libravach. I hung up and sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone like it might explain anything. Outside, the sun came up over the Rockies, lighting the driveway where Claudia's SUV had been parked just yesterday. The world looked the same, but everything had shifted. I changed out of pajamas, pulled on jeans, and my old army jacket, the one with the faded unit patch Dad used to brag about. When I zipped it up, it felt heavier than usual, like it knew this wasn't over. As I locked the front door, I looked once more at the garage. The smell of motor oil lingered, faint but stubborn, like the man who left it behind. The drive to Delaney Motors was 20 minutes of silence. My thoughts kept circling the same loop. Dad's car, Claudia's smirk, Frank's voice saying, "He told me to call you." When I pulled into the lot, I saw the sign, blue letters fading from the sun, Delaney Classic Motors, since 1985. Rows of old cars gleamed under morning light, but my eyes went straight to the burgundy Mustang parked near the service bay. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It was really there, perfect, polished, like it had never left home. Then a man stepped out from the office, gray hair, denim shirt, eyes that looked like they'd seen too many goodbyes. He nodded once when he saw me. "Captain Grant," he said, walking closer. "You look just like him. Ed class." I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but the words that came out were simple. "You said he left something for me?" Frank glanced toward the car, then back at me. "Yeah, it's in his handwriting. Said to give it to you if things ever went wrong." My stomach tightened. Things have gone very wrong. He nodded slowly. "Then I guess it's time." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope, my name written across the front in my father's unmistakable block letters. The world felt very still. Whatever was inside, I already knew it wasn't just about a car. It was about the truth my dad hadn't lived long enough to tell me. Frank slid the envelope across the counter like it was evidence in a murder case. The paper was yellowed and thick, sealed with one of those wax dots my dad used to use on letters when he got sentimental about doing things the old-fashioned way. His handwriting was bold, military block letters that didn't leave room for emotion. I picked it up, and for a second it felt like holding a piece of him. Frank leaned his elbows on the counter. He dropped it off 2 weeks before his heart attack. Told me, "If Claudia ever sells that car, Mel needs this." I stared at Frank. "Did he say why?" He shook his head. "Didn't want to. Just said it would make sense to you one day." There was a quiet hum in the garage old radios, wrenches clinking, an air compressor kicking on somewhere in the back. It smelled like every memory I had of being 10 years old, handing my dad sockets while he cursed under his breath at some impossible bolt. Frank motioned to the Mustang. "Keys are in it. Go ahead." I opened the driver's door. The interior was spotless, the same black leather Dad had obsessed over. The glove compartment was slightly ajar, and when I opened it, I found a small USB stick taped inside, labeled in Dad's handwriting, "Mel, private." I didn't say anything. I just pocketed it and got out of the car. Frank was watching me like a man who knew more than he wanted to. "You should probably read the letter before you look at that drive," he said. I tore the seal and unfolded the pages. "Mel, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong. I don't have much time, and I can't be sure who's listening anymore. Claudia's been making strange moves, documents, phone calls, people showing up I don't trust. If the car changes hands, that means she's crossed a line. Inside the USB are records I started collecting. Names, numbers, maybe nothing or maybe everything. You'll know what to do. Don't confront her alone. She's smarter than she looks, and that man she's with isn't who he says he is." Dad. My stomach dropped halfway through the letter, and by the time I finished, my hands were shaking. Frank said quietly, "Harold knew something. He came by here looking pale as hell. Said his heart wasn't the only thing giving out." I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and tried to process what any of this meant. "You think Claudia's involved in something illegal?" Frank rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know what to think. But that man she's running off with? I've seen him before. Evan Ross, right?" "Yeah. Came here once. Said he wanted to buy a Corvette. Seemed too polished, you know. The kind of guy who lies for sport." That tracked. Evan always had the slick confidence of someone who thought charm was a currency. Frank, can I keep the car here for now? It's safe where it is. Take your time. And Mel? Yeah? Whatever this is, don't let it turn you into her. That line hit harder than I wanted to admit. When I got back home, I plugged the USB into my laptop. There were folders labeled Arizona, Florida, bank transfers, and one that just said Claudia. I clicked that one first. Inside were PDF scanned documents, emails, even screenshots of text messages. One email subject line read, "Regarding the Hathaway estate." I opened it. Evan's name was right there in the thread. So was Claudia's, using an old email address I hadn't seen in years. The messages talked about clients, liquidating assets, and avoiding paper trails. It was clinical, professional, and deeply illegal. Then came the picture scans of checks, contracts, notarized letters with forged signatures. One was from a man named Arthur Mills, authorizing the sale of a property in Phoenix. Only the signature wasn't his. It was my sister's handwriting. The next folder had transaction lists, money transfers to offshore accounts, dates, and one shared account in both Claudia's and Evan's names. I scrolled through line after line, my pulse climbing with every one. My dad had uncovered a full-blown scam, and Claudia was part of it. The military side of my brain kicked in. Objective, method, next step. I needed verification. Someone who could confirm what I was seeing. I thought about calling the police but stopped myself. Dad had warned me not to confront her without proof. And proof meant more than screenshots. That's when I remembered Reuben Cole. He and I had served together years ago, Army CID, the investigative division. Retired now, but still sharp. I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Mel Grant, I'll be damned. Thought you'd disappeared off the radar." "Not quite. You still do private work?" "Depends who's asking. Someone with a problem that smells like fraud." He laughed. "That's my favorite kind." We met an hour later at a diner off Academy Boulevard. Reuben looked the same as he did 10 years ago, crew cut, no nonsense, like every day was inspection day. I slid the USB across the table. "Tell me what you think." He plugged it into his tablet and scrolled. After a few minutes, his expression went from curious to grim. "Where'd you get this?" "My dad, before he died." He nodded slowly. "These are legit documents. Whoever made them knew what they were doing. Your sister and her boyfriend didn't just dip their toes in fraud, they dove headfirst." I felt heat rise behind my eyes, the kind that isn't tears, just fury trying to keep itself contained. Reuben went on. "Look at this, Evan Ross. That name's familiar. He's on an old FBI watch list. Nothing stuck, but there's chatter about elder financial abuse. Fake investment deals, fake charities, you name it. So my sister's in this up to her neck." He nodded. "And your dad knew. Smart man. Probably started digging when he realized where her money was coming from." That hit hard. The idea that my father, already dying, had been trying to protect me from my own sister. Reuben sat back. "You want me to dig deeper? I can cross-check this with a couple databases. Might take a few days." "Bro. Do it. I need everything." He studied me for a long second. "You going after her?" "I just want the truth." He smirked. "You always were bad at lying." He wasn't wrong. When I left the diner, the sky was turning orange, and I could see the mountains glowing in the distance. I thought about Dad's voice, calm and steady, telling me to trust the facts. The facts right now pointed one way. My sister had crossed a line even he couldn't fix. That night, I sat at the kitchen table again. The envelope, the USB, the letter, they all lay in front of me like pieces of a puzzle I didn't ask to solve. I should have felt grief or sadness, but what I felt was something else: resolve. The kind of resolve that comes from 15 years of following orders and realizing this time the mission was personal. I opened my laptop again and started typing out a list of names, dates, and bank accounts. There was no going back to normal life now, not with this in front of me. Somewhere out there, Claudia and Evan were drinking wine and planning their Paris escape, thinking they'd gotten away with everything. They had no idea what their father left behind or who he left it to. The smell of burnt coffee filled the kitchen while Reuben's words replayed in my head. Your sister and her boyfriend didn't just dip their toes in fraud, they dove headfirst. It was one thing to suspect Claudia of being selfish. It was another to realize she might actually be a criminal. I'd spent my life trusting procedures and checklists, That's how you survive in the military: facts, chain of command, discipline. But now there was no chain of command. Just me, my dead father's warnings, and a sister who treated family trust like a bank to be emptied. The next morning I packed a small notebook, printed copies of the documents from the USB, and drove to Ruben's office. His place was small, old warehouse turned private investigation firm with a coffee maker that looked older than both of us. He was already there, scrolling through his computer with that same neutral face he wore during interrogations. "Morning, Captain," he said without looking up. I cross-referenced those names on the drive: Arthur Mills, Ron Hathaway, and one other, Gene Palmer. All elderly. All filed complaints about being scammed in Arizona or Florida. Guess who pops up near every case? I leaned over his shoulder. On the screen were property sale records, wire transfers, and photos of Evan, different haircuts, fake names, but the same slick grin. "He's good," Ruben said. "Professional level forgery. But your sister's name shows up in witness logs, paperwork assistant, sometimes power of attorney. She's not just helping him, she's part of it." My stomach turned. "So she's been doing this for years?" "Looks that way. They target older men with property or savings. Evan charms them. Claudia plays the legal expert. Once they get access, everything disappears." I sank into the chair across from him. "And Dad figured this out before he died." Ruben nodded. "And he tried to stop it quietly. Probably why he warned that dealer, Frank." He handed me a printed list of last known victims and addresses. "If you want the truth, start calling these people. Or what's left of them." By afternoon, I was sitting in my truck in a grocery store parking lot, phone in hand, rehearsing what I'd say. "Hi, this is Captain Mel Grant. I think you may have met my sister." Yeah, that didn't sound insane at all. I took a breath and called the first number. An elderly man answered, cautious. "Arthur Mills." "Mr. Mills, my name's Mel Grant. I'm calling about a woman named Claudia Wells or Claudia Grant. She might have used both." Silence. Then a soft sigh. I knew this day would come. "Oh." He told me the story like it had been waiting years to get out. Claudia and Evan had shown up pretending to be financial advisors, offering to help him manage his late wife's estate. They talked him into selling a small property in Tucson, said they'd invest the money. A week later, they vanished. $210,000 gone. "The cops said it was legal," he said bitterly. "Papers had my signature, notarized. But I never signed a damn thing." I could hear the shame in his voice, the kind that eats people alive when they realize they've been conned by someone who looked trustworthy. After hanging up, I called the second number, Ron Hathaway. His story matched almost word for word Evan under a different name, helping his aging mother sell her house after convincing her she couldn't live alone anymore. Claudia was the attorney on the deal. By the time I hung up, my hands were clenched so tight the phone creaked. I called Ruben. "You were right. They've been running this for years." "Then we build a timeline," he said. "Pattern, victims, money trail. That's how we take them down." "Take them down legally, you mean?" "Depends how patient you're feeling." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure patience was something I had left. That night I went through the folder again. Dad's notes, names, receipts. There was one line scribbled near the bottom of a page. "Check Claudia's legal filings. Guardianship documents." I froze. Guardianship. In my world, that meant one thing: claiming someone incapable of managing their own life. I opened my laptop and searched Colorado probate filings under her name. It took 10 minutes before I found a petition filed 3 months ago claiming that I, Melissa Grant, was suffering from post-service mental impairment. She was trying to have me declared legally incompetent. I stared at the screen, heat rising in my chest. She'd forged medical references, listed fake witnesses, even attached a fake psychologist's note. The plan was clear: get control of my share of Dad's estate, then sell the house. I called Ruben again. She filed a guardianship case against me. He whistled low. "That's next-level evil. She's saying I'm unstable from combat trauma. You do realize that's textbook manipulation, right? Create a paper trail that makes you look crazy before you can expose her." I felt my jaw lock. Then we flipped the script. "She wants a game? We'll play by my rules." Ruben chuckled. "Now you sound like the captain I remember." Over the next few days, we gathered everything: emails, bank statements, the fake court filing, Ruben's contact in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division agreed to quietly review the materials. No promises, but enough to make me feel like this wasn't just screaming into the void. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's handwriting, "Don't confront her alone." I wondered if he'd seen this exact pattern before. Maybe he'd tried to stop her, and that's what killed him faster than his heart condition. Friday morning, Ruben called. "Got something for you," he said. "Evan booked 2 one-way tickets to Paris. Departures in 5 days. Claudia's name is on the reservation." I laughed without humor. "They're running." "Yeah, but not yet. Maybe they think they've covered their tracks." They haven't. I opened my notebook and flipped to a blank page, writing a single line. Objective: expose and contain targets before flight. It was cold, clinical, and exactly what I needed. That afternoon, I visited Dad's grave for the first time in weeks. The stone was clean, the grass trimmed. I stood there, hands in my jacket pockets, and said quietly, "I found it, Dad. You were right. About all of it." The wind picked up, carrying that dry Colorado scent dust, pine, faint gasoline from the nearby road. For a moment, I could almost hear him again. "Facts. Not feelings, kid. Facts." On the way home, I stopped at Frank's dealership. He looked up from a carburetor when I walked in. "You look like someone who hasn't slept." "I haven't." He nodded toward the Mustang. "She's been waiting for you." I ran a hand along the hood, the metal warm under the afternoon Sunday. Dad hid evidence in this car. He knew it might come to this. Frank hesitated. "He also left something else." I looked up. "What do you mean?" He motioned me toward the back office and pulled out a small wooden box. Said if you ever came looking for answers, I should give you this too. Inside was a folded map, 2 old photos, and a flash drive labeled simply, Coleman. I frowned. "What's this?" Frank shrugged. "Your dad said it was the name of a man who'd know what really happened." I looked at the flash drive again. The label neat and deliberate. Ruben's last name was Cole, not Coleman, which meant someone else had been part of my father's plan. Someone he trusted enough to hide in plain sight. And whoever this Coleman was, he just became my next objective. The sound of tires crunching over gravel echoed in my head long after I left Frank's lot. The flash drive marked Coleman sat heavy in my jacket pocket, colder than the air outside. I didn't know who this man was or how he fit into my father's plan, but something told me that whatever he had uncovered would make things much clearer and probably a lot uglier. I didn't wait until morning. At home, I brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to wake the dead and plugged the drive into my laptop. 2 folders popped up, case notes and audio files. The first contained scanned reports, investigative notes, even surveillance photos of Evan and Claudia. My father hadn't been working alone. Peter Coleman was a private investigator, licensed in both Arizona and Florida. The first file I opened was dated 18 months before Dad died. Coleman's notes were blunt and methodical. Subject: Evan Ross. Aliases: Evan Carter, Evan Jameson. Active in elder fraud networks across multiple states. Accomplice: female, likely romantic partner. Operates under alias Claudia Wells or Claudia Grant. Pattern involves emotional manipulation of male relatives with elderly parents. Target family assets through caregiver concern narrative. I leaned back in my chair. Caregiver concern. That was exactly what Claudia had been doing, planting doubts about my stability, my finances, my mental health. I scrolled through pages of Coleman's reports. Timestamps, transaction records, phone logs, even photos from surveillance. One image froze me, Claudia walking arm in arm with Evan into a courthouse in Phoenix. The caption read, "Filed property transfer under Mills case." There was another note in Coleman's handwriting. Harold believes she'll eventually move against her own family. Told him to be prepared. Suggested creating evidence trail and backup witness. My throat tightened. Dad had known she'd come for me eventually. The second folder held audio files. I clicked the first one. My father's voice filled the room, steady but tired. "Coleman, it's Harold. If something happens to me, make sure Mel gets everything. She'll know what to do. Claudia's smarter than I gave her credit for, but she's not careful. There's always a pattern." That was all it took for every muscle in my chest to tense. I hadn't heard his voice in 8 months, and now it sounded like a ghost whispering from the other side. The next morning, I drove straight to Ruben's office and tossed the flash drive on his desk. My dad had a private investigator. His name's Peter Coleman. Ruben raised an eyebrow. That explains the file structure. These notes are clean, professional. Guy knew what he was doing. I want to find him. Already ahead of you, Ruben said, typing on his keyboard. He's based in Phoenix, still active. Retired law enforcement. You want me to make contact? No, I'll go myself. Oh, Mel, it's a 12-hour drive. I've done longer for less. He didn't argue. Fine, but take this. He slid a small recording device across the desk. If Claudia calls or tries anything, record it. If you confront her, I want her words on tape. Not planning to confront her yet. Sure, he said dryly, and I don't drink coffee. By dawn, I was on the highway heading south, the mountains fading behind me. The further I drove, the more the landscape flattened into desert. I stopped only for gas and bad diner food, and by evening, I was in Phoenix. Coleman's office was in a low beige strip mall between a bail bonds shop and a dog groomer. The man himself looked exactly like I expected, 60-ish tan lines from sunglasses and an expression that could slice through concrete. You must be Harold's daughter, he said when I introduced myself. Yeah. He told you about me? He talked about you a lot. Said you got his stubborn streak. Mass. Can't imagine where that came from. He smiled, just barely. He told me if you ever showed up, it meant Claudia finally crossed the line. She sold his car to fund her trip to Paris. Coleman let out a low whistle. Then she's cashing out. He motioned for me to sit and pulled up his files on a computer that looked one update away from catching fire. Your father was trying to expose a fraud ring. Claudia and Evan are small fish compared to the people they used to work with. But they were getting sloppy. Harold gathered more than enough to hand to the feds. Problem was, he didn't trust anyone after she got close to him again. He thought she'd kill him? Coleman hesitated. He didn't say that. But he did tell me she was messing with his medications. Nothing lethal, just enough to make him seem forgetful. Confused. My stomach twisted. She wanted him to look incompetent. Exactly. Classic play. Once she had power of attorney, she could move his assets legally. But he caught on before she finished the job. I sat there in silence for a long minute, staring at the old detective's screen glowing in the dim office. He left me his evidence, but I can't take this to the police yet, not without proof they're still active. Coleman nodded. Then we build it. I can reopen surveillance on Evan. He's back in Colorado, right? Yeah, for now. Flying out next week. Then we have time. Give me 48 hours. He handed me a spare phone with a tracking app. If she calls or texts, it logs automatically. Don't engage her directly. When I left his office, the sky was dark and full of dry lightning. I checked my phone, 3 missed calls from Claudia. My pulse jumped. The last voicemail was short. Mel, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're making things worse. Call me back before you regret it. I didn't call back. The drive home felt longer than before, the desert stretching endlessly. My father's voice kept looping in my head. Don't confront her alone. When I pulled into my driveway the next morning, a FedEx envelope was sitting on the porch. No return address. Inside was a printed notice from the county courthouse guardianship hearing scheduled. Melinda Grant versus Claudia Wells, petitioner. I laughed out loud. A short, bitter sound that didn't even sound human. She was doubling down, filing to have me declared mentally unfit. I walked straight to the garage, opened the Mustang's door, and sat behind the wheel. The air still smelled like dad leather, soap, determination. On the passenger seat, I set the court notice and whispered, You raised the wrong soldier, Claudia. My phone buzzed. A message from Ruben. Got something. Evan's been contacting a broker in Denver, looks like he's liquidating property fast. Coleman's digging deeper. You free to meet tonight? I texted back one word. Always. The garage light flickered once as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine came alive, smooth and powerful, like it remembered who it belonged to. I didn't know it yet, but that sound, the low growl of a Mustang ready to move, was the sound of the reckoning beginning to take shape. The courthouse smelled like dust and cheap coffee, the kind of place where truth always feels negotiable. I sat on the bench outside courtroom 2B with Ruben beside me, watching Claudia glide down the hallway like she owned the building. She wore a cream-colored suit, pearls, and that same empty smile she used to wear when she lied to our father about borrowing his credit card. "Don't say a word unless the judge asks you directly," Reuben muttered. "Remember, this isn't about feelings. It's about facts." Facts. My father's mantra. Facts were all that kept me from standing up and tearing that smug look off her face. The clerk called my name. We entered the room. The fluorescent lights hummed, the kind of sound that eats through patience. Claudia sat across from me at the petitioner's table with her attorney, a thin man with hair too perfect to be trustworthy. The judge glanced over the file. "Miss Wells, you're petitioning for guardianship of your sister, Miss Grant. On what grounds?" Claudia's tone was smooth and practiced. "My sister returned from military service with signs of severe post-traumatic stress and erratic behavior. She's been making unsafe financial decisions, refusing medical help, and isolating herself. I'm only trying to ensure she's cared for properly." The judge looked at me. "Miss Grant, do you have representation?" I nodded toward Reuben, who wasn't technically my lawyer but had enough federal credentials to make people nervous. "Your Honor, my client," he started, voice calm and crisp, "is a decorated officer with 15 years of service and an unblemished record. This petition is a transparent attempt at asset control. We have documentation to show falsified medical notes and prior financial fraud linked to the petitioner." That got the judge's attention. Claudia's smile cracked just slightly. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "Objection. These allegations are irrelevant to the current hearing." The judge didn't blink. "If you're accusing Miss Wells of fraud, Mr. Cole, you better have proof." Reuben handed over a packet, the guardianship form Claudia had filed, complete with fake psychologist signatures, along with an affidavit from the real clinic stating no such evaluation ever occurred. The judge's eyes narrowed. "This is a serious accusation." "Then treat it seriously," Reuben said evenly. Claudia leaned forward, still calm. "Your Honor, my sister's paranoia is part of her condition. She's been manipulated by men like Mr. Cole into believing wild conspiracies about me. I couldn't stop myself." "You forged Dad's signature on a property transfer, Claudia. That's not paranoia, it's math." Her lawyer stood. "Objection. Unsubstantiated claim." Reuben cut in. "We have records to back it." The judge sighed. "I'm continuing this hearing for review, Miss Wells. Until these allegations are verified, your petition is suspended. Miss Grant retains full autonomy." Gavel down. Done. But not finished. As soon as we stepped outside, Claudia caught my arm. Her grip was iron. "You think you won today," she hissed, voice low and venomous. "This is bigger than a court hearing. You don't know who you're dealing with." I looked at her hand, then at her eyes. "Neither do you." Reuben pulled her off me gently. "Back up, ma'am." "That." She straightened, mask snapping back in place. "I'm sorry you had to see her like this, Reuben," she said sweetly. "She gets reactive under pressure." He smiled like a wolf. "Ma'am, I used to interview cartel suspects. You're going to need to try harder." She turned and walked off, heels clicking like a countdown. Reuben and I didn't talk until we were back in the parking lot. "That went better than expected," he said. "Better?" "She just tried to make me legally insane." He shrugged. "And failed. You hit back harder than she thought." I leaned against my car door, exhaling. "She's not going to stop." "No, she won't," he said. "But now we've got her on record lying under oath. That's leverage." That word leverage was one I understood. You don't win by swinging wildly. You win by using pressure. Quietly. That night, I drove home and opened the envelope from the court clerk, official confirmation that the petition was suspended pending investigation. Claudia's fake psychologist's note sat stapled to the front. I tore it in half, then again, until the paper was dust. The house felt too quiet. I made coffee and sat at the table with the Mustang keys in front of me. The metal caught the kitchen light, the GT emblem shining like a promise. I pulled out my father's old laptop from the closet and plugged in Coleman's Drive again. There was one folder I hadn't opened before. Audio, transcripts. Inside were transcribed phone calls. Evan Ross. "You sure she's buying it?" Claudia, completely. "She's too disciplined for her own good. Once the guardianship's approved, we'll sell the house, liquidate everything. Then Paris, and we're done." Evan. "You're sure the car's out of the way?" Claudia. Sold it to some old mechanic friend of Dad's. He won't dig deeper. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I hit print and watched the evidence come out one page at a time. Ruben called just as I was gathering the papers. Got something, he said. Coleman found one of Evan's victims in Tampa willing to talk. The FBI's getting interested. Interested how? Not officially. Yet. But once we have more proof, they'll move. Then we make sure they get it. Mel, he said after a pause. I know that look in your voice. Don't do anything reckless. Reckless? I said. You mean efficient? He groaned. Same difference. I hung up and stared at the wall. My father's framed service photo staring back. He looked young there, confident, steady, the kind of man who believed truth always came out in the end. I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. Truth didn't come out on its own. You had to drag it into the light, kicking and screaming. The next morning, I went back to Delaney Motors. Frank was working under a car, grease up to his elbows. He slid out when he saw me. You look like hell, Captain. And Maction. I've been worse. He wiped his hands. I heard about the hearing. Word travels fast. Small town. He nodded toward the Mustang. You gonna take her out today? Not yet. Not until this is over. Frank studied me for a second, then said, Your dad used to say the car wasn't about speed. It was about control. Anyone can floor it. Only the smart ones know when to brake. I smiled faintly. He was a philosopher with a wrench. That's one way to put it. And sir. As I was leaving, my phone buzzed again, unknown number. I answered without thinking. Captain Grant. A man's voice said. This is Agent Donovan with the FBI. We've received materials from a Mr. Cole regarding financial fraud involving Evan Ross and a potential accomplice, Claudia Wells. We'd like to meet. Finally. The system was waking up. I gave him a time and place Monday morning, 10 a.m. at Ruben's office. When I hung up, my reflection in the car window caught my eye. I looked calm, controlled. But underneath, something else was stirring, something colder. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclaiming everything they'd tried to take. That night, I sat outside on the porch, the mountains glowing faintly under moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. I watched the shadows stretch across the yard, thought about Claudia's smirk, Evan's arrogance, and my father's last letter. He'd told me not to confront them alone. I wasn't going to. But I wasn't going to run, either. By sunrise Monday, the sky over Colorado Springs looked like it was built from steel. I'd been up since 4, pacing the kitchen, waiting for Ruben to call. When the coffee pot beeped, I realized I'd already had 2 cups and hadn't tasted either. Old habit from the Army nerves get burned off by motion, not caffeine. At 9:45, I pulled into Ruben's office parking lot. The FBI agent was already there, dark suit, haircut straight from Quantico, face that didn't believe in small talk. Agent Donovan, he said, shaking my hand. Captain Grant, thanks for coming in. Ruben sat beside me, notebook ready. Donovan opened a folder and started like a man who didn't waste time. We've been following Ross for years. He's slick moves across state lines, keeps everything under the radar. But your father's files, they change things. He documented patterns we didn't have access to. And your sister's involvement confirms joint conspiracy. He looked up, expression hard to read. You're sure the recordings and emails are authentic? They're in my father's handwriting. He died before he could finish what he started. Donovan nodded slowly. We've got enough to open a formal case, but we'll need you to cooperate. We'll need dates, phone records, everything your father left. Ruben leaned back. We've already built a timeline. They're scheduled to fly out to Paris on Friday. Donovan's pen stopped mid-note. You're certain? Booked under Evan Ross and Claudia Wells, one way. The agent closed the folder. Then we don't have time for slow paperwork. If they leave the country, we may never get jurisdiction again. I looked between them. What's the play? Donovan's tone went tactical. We let them think they're clear. Once they're at the airport, we intercept with a warrant, financial fraud, forgery, and wire transfers. If your sister resists, we add obstruction. Ruben nodded. Classic sting. Clean, quick. Donovan looked at me. You okay with that, Captain? Depends, I said. Do I get to be there when she realizes it's over? He didn't answer directly, but his silence was a maybe. After the meeting, Ruben and I went for lunch at a diner across the street. Neither of us ate much. My fork just pushed eggs around while the air buzzed with that quiet, before something breaks. "You still thinking like a soldier," Ruben said finally. "Operational mindset. That's good, but don't let it eat you alive." "I'm not angry," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You're shaking." I looked down at my hands, fingers tapping the table in a rhythm I didn't notice. "I'm focused." Ruben smirked. "Focus looks a lot like furious." He wasn't wrong. That afternoon, we got everything in motion. Donovan coordinated with the Denver FBI field office, while Ruben ran verification on the financial data. I spent 3 hours on calls, banks, notaries, even airline security to make sure our timeline held. It was a different kind of battlefield, but it felt familiar. Structured chaos with too many moving parts, and no room for error. Around dusk, Ruben's office looked like a command center. Maps, flight itineraries, call logs all spread across the wall. He handed me a file labeled Operation Phoenix. "Seriously?" I said. "You're naming it?" "Every mission needs one. Besides, poetic symmetry rising from ashes, family betrayal, all that crap." I almost smiled. He pointed to the board. "We'll have plainclothes agents stationed at DIA. You, me, and Donovan will wait in the secondary terminal near international departures. Once they check in, the FBI moves." I nodded. "And if they suspect anything before then?" "Then we adapt." That night, I went home and stood in the garage again. The Mustang sat gleaming under the overhead light, silent but alive in its way. Dad's old workbench was still covered in tools arranged with military precision. Every wrench had a home. Every mark told a story. I ran a hand along the hood and said quietly, "You'd hate this, wouldn't you, Dad?" seeing Claudia dragged away in handcuffs. "Oh?" But I knew what he'd say back. Discipline isn't cruelty. It's duty. At 2,300 hours, my phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. "Claudia, I heard about the hearing. You really can't let things go, can you?" "Me? You forged legal documents, Claudia." "Claudia, you always did exaggerate. You were never good at handling pressure." "Me? You're going to regret underestimating me." "Claudia, you won't do anything. You never could." I didn't reply. Instead, I saved the texts, screenshotted them, and sent them to Ruben. He wrote back one line: "Perfect evidence of intent. Keep her talking if you can." But I didn't want to talk to Claudia. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done the same way I had felt the emptiness of that garage. The next 2 days passed like pre-mission countdown. Every hour accounted for. Every contact confirmed. I slept maybe 4 hours total. Ruben's updates came steady. FBI warrant approved. Airport security briefed. Coleman tracing last financial transfer. Thursday morning, I got a call from Coleman himself. "Captain, I've got confirmation on the Paris transfer. The funds came from a fraudulent investment account, same pattern as the Arizona case. It's airtight." That's what I needed to hear. "You sure you want to be there when it happens?" he asked. "Most people prefer distance." "I'm not most people." He laughed softly. "No, you're your father's daughter." End quote. That evening, I packed light, a notebook, ID, and Dad's letter. I wasn't sure why I brought it, only that it felt like armor. Before leaving, I locked the house, double-checked the garage door, and paused one last time in front of the Mustang. "We're almost there," I said aloud. The drive to Denver International took 2 hours. Ruben was waiting near the entrance, wearing his old Army field jacket like a badge of quiet defiance. "You ready?" he asked. "Ready enough." 1. Agent Donovan joined us near the security checkpoint. "They've checked in," he said. "Boarding starts in 40 minutes. When they hit the first security scan, we move." Through the glass, I could see Claudia and Evan standing in line at the check-in counter. They looked relaxed. She had her hair pinned up, dressed like she belonged in some glossy travel magazine. He wore that same arrogant posture, hands in pockets, smirk ready for the world. Ruben adjusted his earpiece. "You sure you don't want to wait outside the line of sight?" "I need to see it," I said simply. We moved closer, staying behind a column near baggage claim. The sound of rolling suitcases and airport chatter filled the air, ordinary life moving around extraordinary deceit. Then I heard her voice clear, polished, fake. "I can't wait to leave this place behind," she told Evan. He kissed her cheek. New start, no baggage. The irony nearly made me laugh. Donovan's voice came through the comms. "Agents in position. Wait for visual confirmation of ID." Claudia handed her passport to the airline clerk. The agent nodded, scanned it, and handed it back. That was the moment. Donovan spoke quietly. "Now." Two plainclothes agents approached from the side. One flashed a badge, the other gestured toward the hallway. "Ma'am, sir, we need you to come with us." Evan frowned. "What's this about?" "Financial crimes investigation." "Oh." Claudia turned, confusion twisting into fury when she saw me step out from behind the column. Her face went pale, then sharp as glass. "You," she spat. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The agents guided them away, firm but controlled. Donovan followed. Ruben stood beside me, hands in his jacket pockets. "You did it," he said quietly. "No," I said, watching them disappear into the corridor. "Dad did. I just finished what he started." Endocrete. The PA crackled overhead, calling passengers to their gates. Around us, life moved on vacations, business trips, homecomings, normal people living normal mornings. But for me, this was the first one in years that finally felt steady. The kind of steady that comes not from peace, but from purpose. I exhaled, slow and controlled, like I used to before a mission briefing. Ruben handed me a coffee from the nearby kiosk. "You know," he said, "for a revenge story, this one's got a hell of a moral code." I sipped the coffee, bitter and hot. "It's not revenge," I said. "It's discipline." Ruben smiled. "Same difference, Captain." Maybe it was, but for the first time I didn't care about the difference. The air inside Denver International Airport was a mix of jet fuel, perfume, and quiet panic. Travelers moved like a slow river, pulling luggage, sipping bad coffee, and checking screens that told them where to go. I'd been through a dozen airfields during deployment, but this one felt different. This one was personal. Ruben walked a few steps ahead, eyes scanning like he was back on patrol. Agent Donovan spoke into his earpiece, calm as ever. "Team 2 in position near Gate 14. Targets are moving toward check-in." From behind a column, I spotted Claudia first. She was laughing, really laughing, as she adjusted her sunglasses and handed over her passport. Evan stood beside her, wearing that same smug expression that made my fists itch. They looked like a couple on vacation, not two people about to be arrested for federal fraud. I stayed quiet, every muscle coiled. Ruben leaned in. "You good?" "I've been better," I said, voice low. Donovan's voice came again. "Confirming ID match. We're a go in 30 seconds. Time slowed. Claudia brushed her hair back, checking her reflection in a glass divider. Evan scrolled on his phone, bored. I couldn't stop staring at her, my sister. Same eyes as mine, same chin, even the same stubborn posture our father used to complain about. And yet, standing there, she looked like a stranger. "Agents move," Donovan said. Two plainclothes FBI officers approached. The first one flashed his badge. "Ma'am, sir, we need you to come with us." Evan Laupid. "This some kind of joke?" "Not at all," the agent replied. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Financial fraud, forgery, identity theft." Claudia turned to him sharply. "Excuse me? That's ridiculous." Her voice didn't shake. It was smooth, professional, the voice of someone who's lied for so long it feels like breathing. The second agent stepped closer. "We'll explain everything at the station. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." Then, Claudia saw me. Her entire face changed shock, disbelief, then something darker. The same mask she used when she realized she'd been caught as a kid stealing from Dad's wallet. Only now it wasn't $20. "You," she said, voice slicing through the terminal noise. Evan turned, confused. "You know her?" "She's my sister," Claudia spat. "The one who can't mind her own damn business." Ruben took half a step forward. "Stay calm," he muttered. The agents guided them away, but Claudia twisted, shouting over her shoulder. "You think you've won? You're not better than me, Mel. You're just a soldier with nothing left to fight for." People were staring now, phones out, recording. I didn't move, didn't blink. I'd spent my life learning how to stand still under fire. Evan jerked against the agent's grip. "This is a mistake. We didn't do anything wrong." Donovan walked up beside me, holding a printed warrant. "Actually," he said, voice steady, "you did plenty." Evan's bravado cracked then. He went quiet, jaw tight. Claudia stopped shouting, just staring at me with that cold fury that could freeze an entire room. They disappeared through the security corridor, still flanked by agents. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for it to feel satisfying. It didn't. Donovan came back a moment later. "Because this case involves multiple states and our main financial crimes division is in New York, we're flying them to Manhattan for processing. Our flight leaves in 2 hours. Are you two coming?" Ruben nodded at me, and I agreed. Ruben finally spoke. "You okay?" I nodded, though the word didn't feel true. "I thought it would feel different." "That's because you don't do this for the feeling," he said. "You do it for the balance." Ow. We followed Donovan to a quiet conference room near baggage claim. A wall of glass looked out over the runway where planes rose and disappeared into the morning haze. Donovan sat across from us, flipping through paperwork. "They'll be processed tonight," he said. "Your father's files will be key evidence. We'll coordinate with financial crimes to expand the investigation. The fake guardianship petition alone is enough to lock her down." Ruben crossed his arms. "And Evan?" 12 counts minimum," Donovan replied. "Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. He'll talk eventually. They always do." I looked out the window, watched a plane take off. "He'll turn on her." "Maybe," Donovan said. "But she's tougher than most. Cold logic. No remorse." He wasn't wrong. Claudia was the kind of person who believed survival meant winning, even if it meant burning everything behind her. After signing a few documents, Ruben and I walked out to the parking garage. The air outside was humid and heavy. He tossed me the car keys. "You drive," he said. "You need something to do with your hands." The silence on the flight to New York was thick. On the drive from the airport to the hotel, Ruben finally broke it. "You know," he said, "I've worked with people like her before. Smart, ruthless, always convinced they're the victim. But your sister, she's something else. She planned this for years." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Dad saw it coming. He just didn't get the chance to stop it. Ruben looked out the window. He did. He stopped it the only way he could, by leaving you the truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claudia's face at the airport: anger, disbelief, betrayal. Maybe she wasn't capable of guilt, but I was. Because no matter what she'd done, she was still my sister. At dawn, my phone buzzed. It was Donovan. We got them processed. Evan cracked around 3 a.m., gave us everything: offshore accounts, shell companies, even the safe deposit box locations. And Claudia, still playing innocent, claims she was manipulated, but the paper trail's solid. She's done. I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed, the gray morning light cutting across the room. Ruben was already up, sitting at the small hotel table with a notepad full of scribbles. "She'll never admit it," I said quietly. He didn't look up. "Doesn't matter. Evidence speaks louder than apologies." I stared out the window, watching planes taxi across the runway. She said I was just a soldier with nothing left to fight for. Ruben smirked. Guess she forgot soldiers don't quit until the mission's complete. When we left for the courthouse later that day, the city was waking up: horns, coffee carts, chaos. I walked into the federal building with the same calm I used to carry before combat medevacs. Focused. No emotion. Just the task. Inside, Claudia sat at a table in handcuffs. Her lawyer whispered something, but she wasn't listening. She was staring straight at me. For the first time, her eyes looked unsure. Not scared, not sorry, just lost. The judge entered, the gavel echoed, and the sound felt like an ending, but not the kind that brings relief, the kind that just clears the air before whatever comes next. As the charges were read: fraud, conspiracy, forgery, Claudia didn't flinch. When the judge mentioned my name as the reporting witness, her eyes locked on me again. I met her stare and didn't look away. She mouthed one word: why? I wanted to tell her it wasn't revenge, that I would have forgiven almost anything except betrayal that wore our father's face, but I said nothing. The silence said enough. Outside, Donovan shook my hand. You did good, Captain, Reuben added. Your father would be proud. I looked toward the horizon, the city stretching endlessly ahead. Let's finish the paperwork, I said. Then I'm going home. Neither of them argued. Some battles don't end with explosions, they end with signatures, quiet and permanent. We walked to the car as the morning light spilled over the skyline. I slid into the driver's seat, engine humming steady. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing anyone. I was heading somewhere instead. The holding room at the Manhattan Federal Building was cold enough to make your bones ache. I stood behind the observation glass with Reuben and Agent Donovan, watching Claudia sit at the metal table. Her wrists were cuffed, but her posture was perfect, shoulders square, chin high, like she still believed this was a misunderstanding she could charm her way out of. Evan sat 2 rooms over, already crumbling. His lawyer looked exhausted. Claudia's was trying to negotiate, but Donovan had made it clear there wasn't much left to negotiate. Evan's talking, Reuben said, arms crossed. Gave up everything within 2 hours. Donovan nodded. He's naming names, transactions, even their offshore partners. Says Claudia handled the paperwork, he just followed her lead. That's a lie, I said quietly. Oh, it is, Donovan replied. But it's useful. Once we corroborate his claims with your father's files, we'll have her boxed in. She won't walk out of this one. Inside the room, Claudia leaned back in her chair. The agent sitting across from her, a woman named Reyes, was calm and deliberate. You know we've already traced the accounts, Reyes said. The money moved through at least 6 shell companies, all registered under false names, all with your digital signature. Claudia smiled. Anyone can fake a digital signature. Sure, Reyes said, but not one attached to your social security number. For the first time, Claudia's smile faltered. Reuben exhaled, long and slow. There it is. Reyes slid a folder across the table. These are your father's files. He was working with a private investigator. He documented everything. You knew he was onto you, didn't you? Claudia didn't answer. She looked down at the folder, her jaw tight, and for a moment I saw something fear, or maybe shame, but it disappeared as fast as it came. Reyes waited a beat. You want to know what I think? You started small, a few cons, a little fraud. Then you met Evan, and he made it bigger. But when your father started asking questions, you panicked. That's why you filed the guardianship petition. You weren't protecting your sister. You were covering your tracks. Claudia finally looked up. You done guessing? Or are we going to talk about what really happened? Reyes didn't flinch. Sure, tell me. Claudia's voice went cold. My father chose her. Always her. He gave her the car, the house, the name. I took care of him for years while she was off playing soldier. And when he died, I got nothing. So, yeah, I took what was left. I earned it. It wasn't a confession. It was a justification. Donovan glanced at me. You still want to go in there? I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to, but some things can't be left unsaid. Yeah, I said finally. I need to hear it from her. Reuben gave me a look that said, this isn't protocol, but he didn't stop me. Inside the room, the air felt heavy. Claudia looked up when I entered. Her expression caught somewhere between surprise and contempt. Well, she said, the prodigal daughter shows up. I sat across from her, folded my hands on the table. You could have stopped at any time. I was never going to get what you had, she said, so I made my own way. By stealing from old people? They didn't even know what they had. Neither did you, I said. Dad wasn't perfect, but he gave us everything. You destroyed that for money and a trip to Paris. She laughed, but there was no joy in it. Don't act like you understand sacrifice. You left. You got medals and flags. I got to feed him soup and watch him forget my name. I felt the words hit, because they weren't entirely wrong. I had left. I'd chosen the army over the family. But betrayal doesn't get justified by pain. He didn't forget you, Claudia. He pitied you. Her eyes snapped up. You're lying. He told Frank to hold the car. He knew what you were doing. He left me everything because he trusted me to fix what you broke. Her breath caught. For a second, she wasn't the schemer or the liar. She was just my sister again, the one who used to braid my hair and steal my sneakers. Then it was gone, replaced by ice. You think you're the hero, she said, but all you did was ruin me. No, I said. You did that yourself. She leaned forward. You always needed to win, even now. And I stood, ignoring the cuffs clinking as she shifted. This isn't winning, it's cleaning up. When I stepped out, Donovan was waiting. That's all we need. The room's recorded. She just admitted motive. Ruben gave a small nod. That'll hold up. Donovan gathered the files. We'll process the full confession reports tonight. Evan's plea deal will go through first 12 years minimum. Claudia's looking at 5, maybe 6 with restitution. I just nodded. Words didn't do much at that point. Later that afternoon, Ruben and I sat in the diner near his office. The same corner booth, same terrible coffee. The news was already spreading online. Local woman and partner arrested in multi-state fraud scheme. No names yet, but we both knew it was only a matter of time. Ruben scrolled through the headlines. FBI's already confirming links to 3 prior cases. Looks like your dad's file wrapped up a lot of loose ends. I stirred my coffee, watched the swirl fade into black. He knew this would happen. Yeah, Ruben said quietly. He just didn't think you'd have to clean it up alone. Outside, the evening light hit the windows just right, turning the chrome trim of passing cars into gold streaks. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Ruben said, "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know." I smiled faintly. Maybe take a real breath for once. He nodded. "You earned it." When I got home, the house felt lighter somehow. No ghosts left to chase. On the table was the same envelope my father had written, the wax seal still tucked in the corner. I picked it up, unfolded it again, and noticed something I hadn't before, a line at the very bottom, faint pencil marks beneath his signature. "If you're reading this, Mel, it means I was right to trust you. Don't let anger finish what love started." I didn't know if he meant Claudia or me. Maybe both. The next morning, I drove back to Delaney Motors. Frank was under the hood of an old Chevy when he saw me. "Heard about your sister," he said softly. "News travels fast." He nodded toward the back. "The Mustang's ready. I think she's been waiting long enough." I ran my hand along the fender, the black paint gleaming under the shop lights. For months, this car had been a symbol of everything broken. Our family, our past, our silence. Now it felt different. Like closure, or at least the start of something close to it. Frank handed me the keys. "Your dad said once that forgiveness isn't for the person who deserves it, it's for the one who needs peace." I looked at him. "You believe that?" He shrugged. "Depends on the day." I slid into the driver's seat, turned the ignition, and listened to the engine come alive. The sound filled the room steady, powerful, honest. Maybe that's what peace sounded like after all. The courtroom felt smaller the second time around. The buzz of reporters outside, the faint hum of old fluorescent lights, the quiet shuffle of papers, it all blurred together like background noise in a scene I never wanted to star in. Claudia sat 2 rows ahead, dressed in a plain gray suit the prison had loaned her. No makeup, no pearls, no mask left to hide behind. Evan was on the opposite side, his lawyer whispering in his ear like it mattered. It didn't. His deal was already locked in. 12 years, maybe less with good behavior, and a promise to testify against Claudia. When the judge walked in, the sound of the gavel echoed like the click of a safety being switched off. Everyone stood, sat, and waited for the ritual of justice to do its work. United States versus Claudia Wells and Evan Ross, the clerk announced. The prosecutor, a young woman with sharp eyes and an iron posture, stood first. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. The defendants engaged in a systematic pattern of elder financial exploitation across multiple states. The fraud extended over 7 years, totaling more than $2 million. We recommend 12 years for Mr. Peden Ross, for Miss Wells, due to her full cooperation after arrest, which was instrumental in dismantling a larger fraud network operating in 3 other states. The government recommends a 5-year suspended sentence with restitution." That word cooperation hung in the air like smoke. I looked at Claudia, but she didn't turn around. I didn't need her to. I already knew what it meant. She'd finally talked. The defense attorney mumbled something about remorse, rehabilitation, second chances, the usual script. I tuned it out. When it was over, the judge adjusted his glasses and spoke, in that deliberate tone judges have when they're making something sound merciful. "Mr. Ross, The court sentences you to 12 years in federal custody. Miss Wells, 5 years suspended, with mandatory restitution and 1 year of supervised community service. You will not leave the state without permission. The gavel hit wood again, sharp and final. Claudia didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She just exhaled like someone who'd been holding her breath for years and finally decided to stop. As everyone started to move, I stayed seated. The prosecutor came over and shook my hand. You did the right thing, Captain Grant. Not everyone would have gone through with it. I managed a small nod. It wasn't about doing the right thing. It was about finishing what my father started. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps, microphones flashing like gun barrels. Reuben stepped between me and the crowd, his tone clipped but polite. No comment. We got into his truck, and he drove without a word for a while. The city faded into the foothills, traffic thinning as the mountains took over the horizon. Finally, he said, "So that's it. Justice served." Justice, I repeated. Yeah. The word didn't sit right. Justice felt clean, balanced. What I felt was something else, like dust settling after an explosion. Reuben must have seen it on my face. You expected it to feel better. I expected it to feel finished. He nodded. Closure's overrated anyway. We drove the rest of the way in silence. Later that week, the Veterans Association held a small memorial event for my father. It wasn't official, just old friends, a few neighbors, and the kind of people who still believe flags mean something. I stood near the podium, my uniform freshly pressed, metal ribbons aligned with regulation precision. It had been years since I'd worn it. Frank was there too, standing off to the side with his hands folded. When the ceremony started, he gave me a small nod, my cue. I stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the faces. Men who'd served beside my father, women who'd known him as a mentor, a few kids who didn't know who he was but came because their parents said he mattered. My father, I began, wasn't an easy man to love. He didn't talk much about feelings or forgiveness, but he believed in something stronger: duty. He used to say that doing the right thing wasn't supposed to feel good. It was supposed to keep you standing. I glanced toward Frank, who smiled faintly. He didn't live long enough to see what his choices set in motion, I continued, but he gave me one final order to protect what mattered. I think I finally understand what that meant. It wasn't about a car or an inheritance or even his name. It was about honor, and keeping that alive is the only thing that's ever really ours. When the ceremony ended, people came up to shake my hand, share stories, offer condolences. I smiled, thanked them, listened, but my mind was somewhere else, somewhere quieter. Back home, the house felt emptier, but not hollow, more like it was breathing again. I made coffee, opened the mail, and found a letter with the return address: Colorado State Correctional Reentry Program. I knew before I opened it who it was from. The handwriting was Claudia's. Careful, familiar. Mel, they gave me a deal I didn't deserve. I know you had something to do with that. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't even know if I could handle it. But I've been thinking a lot about Dad, about how he looked at us when we were kids. He used to say one of us had his fire and the other had his patience. I think he was wrong. You had both. I'll pay back what I can. It won't fix anything, but maybe it'll mean something. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Claudia. I set the letter down and sat there for a long time. I wasn't sure what to feel: pity, relief, or just the quiet realization that the war between us was finally over. The next morning, Reuben called. You get the letter? Yeah. She mean it? I think she means it the way she can. He paused. That's probably enough. He was right. Sometimes the best apology isn't about making it right, it's about admitting it can't be. Before hanging up, Reuben said, Frank's dropping something off for you today. End quote. 2 hours later, I heard the rumble of an old truck in the driveway. Frank stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. Told you I'd keep her safe, he said, pulling back the tarp from the Mustang. The car gleamed under the sunlight, polished to perfection. On the seat was an envelope. I opened it, another note, this one written years ago in my father's unmistakable handwriting. If this car finds its way back to you, it means the storm's past. Remember, Mel justice isn't revenge, it's balance. Keep it steady. I closed my eyes for a second, feeling something lift off my shoulders. Frank handed me the keys. She runs smooth, like she's been waiting for you. I smiled, turning the key in my hand. Then I guess it's time. The engine started with a low growl, that familiar hum I hadn't heard since the day I came home to an empty garage. It wasn't just metal and horsepower anymore. It was legacy. As I pulled out of the driveway, sunlight flashed off the chrome, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing ghosts. I was driving towards something real again. The morning air was sharp and clean, the kind that makes you feel like the world just got washed overnight. Frank's truck had rumbled out of the driveway an hour ago, leaving me alone with the Mustang and the letter. The house was silent except for the tick of the kitchen clock, and for once that silence didn't feel heavy. I walked out to the garage with a mug of coffee in hand. The door was open, the light spilling across the polished hood of the car. She looked perfect, restored, steady, like time hadn't touched her. I ran my hand along the fender, the metal cool under my palm. Dad used to say machines told the truth because they didn't know how to lie. When they broke, they showed it. When they ran, they meant it. People weren't like that. Claudia definitely wasn't. On the passenger seat sat a small envelope Frank had tucked there. Inside was a photograph me and Claudia, maybe 6 and 10, sitting on the hood of this same car. Dad stood behind us, one hand on each of our shoulders, squinting against the sundae. We looked happy, unbreakable. I stared at that photo for a long time before folding it back into the envelope. Ruben showed up mid-morning holding 2 coffees. "You're hard to reach these days," he said. Wasn't trying to be. He leaned against the workbench looking at the car. "You keeping her?" "I think Dad meant me to." "Good," he said. "Man like Harold doesn't pass down junk." I smiled, faint but real. "How's the case?" "Closed and wrapped. Claudia's transferring restitution payments. Evan's appeal got denied. Looks like you can finally breathe." I didn't answer. Breathing still felt like something I had to remember to do. Ruben nodded toward the open glove box. "You see what's in there?" I hadn't. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. I pulled it out carefully. It was one of Dad's old handwritten notes, grease-stained at the edges. "If you're reading this, then this car made it back home. You did good, Mel. Don't spend your life angry. It's a habit that burns cleaner than gasoline but leaves nothing to rebuild. When you drive this car again, I hope it's because you've forgiven, not because you're still chasing ghosts." Ruben read over my shoulder and let out a slow whistle. Guy had a way with words. "Yeah," I said softly, when he wasn't yelling about spark plugs. We both laughed, and for the first time in months, it didn't sound forced. After Ruben left, I spent the rest of the day cleaning the car inside and out. It was muscle memory wipe, polish, tighten, adjust. Every part of it reminded me of something Dad had taught me. How to listen to the engine. How to feel the vibration through the steering wheel and know what it meant. By the time the sun started dipping behind the ridge, I decided to take her out. I opened the garage door, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The engine came to life like it had been waiting all this time for a reason. The road out of town was quiet, lined with pine trees and the faint smell of wood smoke from distant cabins. I didn't play music. The sound of the car was enough, a low, confident hum, the kind that settled into your chest. At a red light on the edge of town, I glanced at the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw her Claudia sitting beside me like she used to, singing off-key to whatever was on the radio. The light changed, and the image vanished. I took the highway toward the foothills, the one Dad used to drive on Sunday mornings just to keep the oil moving. The wind rushed through the cracked window, cool and sharp. It felt like breathing again, after holding it too long. Halfway up the ridge, I pulled over at the overlook. The valley stretched out below gold grass, scattered barns, and the faint shimmer of town lights starting to glow. I cut the engine and sat in the quiet, letting the echo of it fade. For a long time I thought revenge was about balance, about making things even. But sitting there, I realized Dad had been right. Balance doesn't come from payback. It comes from knowing you didn't let the wrong things change you. I reached over to the passenger seat, picked up the photo again, and smiled. "You messed up, Claudia," I said quietly, "but I hope you find your peace too." When I started the car again, the sky was turning pink and gold. The headlights cut through the twilight as I headed down the mountain road, the Mustang gliding smooth and steady. Every mile felt lighter, every breath easier. Somewhere between the ridge and town, I realized I wasn't thinking about Claudia anymore. I was thinking about Dad, about Ruben, about all the people who'd shown up when things fell apart. Maybe that was what family really was, not blood, but the ones who stayed when the rest ran. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, the stars were out. The garage light flicked on automatically, and the house looked warm for the first time in a long while. I parked the car, shut off the engine, and sat for a moment in the stillness. The Mustang ticked softly as the metal cooled. I could almost hear Dad's voice again, not loud or commanding, just calm. "Keep it steady, Mel." I smiled, resting my hand on the steering wheel. "I'm trying, Dad." "Okay." Then I stepped out, closed the door, and let the night settle around me. The air smelled faintly of oil and pine. For once, that felt like home. Inside, the house waited quietly. On the kitchen counter sat a stack of unopened mail and one last letter from the correctional facility. I didn't rush to open it. Some stories didn't need another ending, they just needed to stop hurting. I turned off the lights, leaving the garage door slightly open so the moonlight could spill across the hood of the Mustang. She'd earned that light. So had I. And for the first time since coming home, I slept without dreaming of empty garages or missing engines, only open roads and the sound of something honest running right. Morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, catching on the chrome edges of the toaster and the old photo frame above the sink. It was the same photo I'd carried around for months, Dad, Claudia, and me sitting on the hood of the Mustang, but this time, it didn't feel like a memory of what I'd lost. It felt like a reminder of what I'd kept. The air smelled faintly of coffee and motor oil. That was the new scent of home. Ruben had stopped by the week before to help me set up the final paperwork for the foundation, the Harold Grant Foundation for Veterans Families. I'd been thinking about it for months, ever since Dad's words about duty and balance stopped echoing like ghosts and started sounding like direction. It started small, a few calls to the VA, some forms, a meeting with a lawyer who specialized in nonprofit setups. Then it turned real. A mission statement, a board, a bank account, money from the stock Dad had left. I could practically hear him grumbling about bureaucracy, but I think even he'd have been proud. By the time I pulled up the foundation website on my laptop, the logo looked solid enough to make me smile. A simple emblem, a road curving into a sunrise, with the words, honor, healing, home, underneath. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Today was the grand opening at the VFW hall. A big day. I looked at the flyer on the counter, then back at the photo of Dad. "This is for you," I whispered. By mid-morning, the hall was buzzing. Veterans in worn jackets with patches from old units. Widows in floral dresses. A handful of local reporters setting up cameras near the podium. The kind of crowd that made you feel small in the best way. Frank arrived early, wearing his old army cap and carrying a tray of donuts. "Can't have a dedication without sugar," he said, grinning. "You're a good man, Frank. Don't spread that rumor." That. Ruben showed up next, in jeans and a clean shirt that still looked like he'd rather be anywhere but a public event. He gave me a nod. "You nervous?" "Not really," I said. "Feels more like the end of a long shift." The ceremony started with the usual pledge, anthem, introductions, but when it came time for me to speak, the room went still. I stepped to the podium, fingers brushing against the paper in front of me, but I didn't look down. "Most of you knew my father," I began. "He believed in fixing things. Cars, people, mistakes, it didn't matter. If it was broken, he'd find a way to make it right. He didn't always say much, but when he did, you remembered it." A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. When I came home after 15 years in uniform, I thought I was done serving. I thought the only things left to protect were the memories of what I'd lost. But it turns out, service doesn't end when the uniform comes off. It just changes shape. Now, I paused, scanning the room faces lined with years, hands folded in quiet understanding. This foundation isn't about revenge or restitution. It's about rebuilding, about helping veterans and their families who've carried more than their share of battles inside and out. My father taught me that honor isn't a medal. It's what you do when nobody's watching. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was the kind that carried weight. When it was over, people stayed to talk, to share stories about my father, to sign up as volunteers. I stood by the door greeting them, shaking hands, promising to keep in touch. By the time the hall started to empty, it felt like something real had begun. Outside, the sky was wide and blue, the kind of day Colorado did best. I walked to the parking lot where the Mustang waited, shining like a badge of memory and forgiveness. Frank whistled low. Still runs smooth, huh? Better than ever. I'm Slash. He clapped my shoulder. Harold, be proud. You kept your word. Yeah, I said softly. I think I finally did. When everyone left, I got in the car and drove. Not fast, not running, just moving. Through town, past the high school, down the stretch of highway where Dad used to test the gears on Sunday mornings. The foundation flyers were still fresh in the back seat, but I didn't need them to know what came next. My phone rang while I was halfway up Ridge Road. It was Ruben. Just got a call, he said, his voice holding a rare note of satisfaction. The foundation's first donation check cleared. Arthur Mills sent it. Said to tell you thanks for giving him his dignity back. I smiled. The words caught me off guard in the best way. That's good to hear, Ruben. Yeah, it is, he said. Figured you'd want to know. Hey, I'm proud of you, you know. I'll hold you to that. End of 12th. We said goodbye, and I drove on until the mountains rose in front of me. Massive and steady, the same way Dad used to seem when I was a kid. I parked at the overlook, the same one I'd stopped at weeks before, and turned off the engine. The world below looked endless. Quiet. Balanced. I took the photo from the glove box again, the one of the three of us. For a moment, it felt like they were both there. Dad beside me, Claudia somewhere finally at peace. Maybe forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Maybe it just means you stop letting the past drive. I set the photo back on the dash, started the car, and eased down the winding road. The engine purred, low and steady, a sound that felt like truth. When I hit the straightaway, I rolled down the window, let the wind fill the car, and said it out loud, just once, just for him. I didn't take revenge, Dad. I kept my promise. Lie. The words hung in the air, soft but solid, carried away by the hum of the Mustang as the road stretched out ahead, open, endless, and finally mine.